Hard Turn is presented by Overlake Medical Center and Clinics.
Life is full of big moments of change and transformation where we have to pivot on our path.
Those moments come with a wide variety of emotions, from fear and anxiety to joy and relief.
I'm Kelly Koopmans.
And I'm Mary Nam.
And this is Hard Turn.
Hi, Kelly.
Hi, Mary. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I think I'm doing great. I
Okay.
think.
Can I take back my answer?
Yes, you can.
It's a little early for me.
Yes.
If you're just joining us, welcome to the Hard Turn podcast.
Mm-hmm.
I'm Mary.
I'm Kelly Koopmans.
We're talking about our schedules. So if you're just listening for the first time, Kelly and I work opposite schedules. She's early mornings, I'm late nights, and we have to find a way to meet up. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's early for me.
Unfortunately for Mary, that means she's coming to work while I've been here for a few hours, so I'm already kind of broken in for the day, or broken for the day, depending on how you look at it.
But that's okay. I'm super excited about my guest today, Kelly.
Okay, dun-da-da-da.
Brad Evans.
All right.
Retired Seattle Sounder FC player.
Scarves up.
Exactly. Rave green. Let's go Sounders. Part of the original 2009 inaugural squad, and the nicest person. What a great conversation we had. So honest and open. I'm so excited to dive into this one. But I just have to say, I'm always fascinated by pro athletes.
And how so?
Because they have such a unique career track, right? Mm-hmm. Their whole life is built on what they can do physically. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes, they've started doing this since they were just little kids.
When they're playing bumblebee soccer,
right.
In this case.
Right. Bumblebee soccer, peewee football, it's all of it. And they dedicate their whole life, but it's based on how long your body can last. Mm-hmm. And it's got to be so much pressure. And Brad was really kind and honest and so open about it. So just diving in, if you're wondering about the Sounders, there's a huge soccer fan base here in Seattle.
Massive. Probably one of the best fan bases of all franchises in the country.
I think so, too. And Brad stands out even with that because, like I said, he was part of the inaugural team. So, the city remembers him. The city loves him. And even in retirement, they embrace him. And so I asked Brad, were you always this good? A lot of the times, with the career athletes, you think about all of the youth achievements and things must have come naturally. Did it come naturally? Were you always this good? You just don't know that you were going to be a huge success? He started playing soccer at a high level at UC Irvine. And here's what he said about his start, his dipping his toe into this next level of the game.
It was a grind. My first year in college, I hated it. I wanted to go home. We were terrible. It was a El Nino year in California. Coming from Arizona, it was like, what is rain? And I was like, I got to get out of here and see the sun. And it was a really, really tough grind. And credit to my parents. I called them after my freshman year too. And I was like, I'm done. I'm ready to come back home. And they were like, no, you're not. You're going to stick it out and you're going to give it one more year and we'll see what happens. My support group has always been awesome and has always kind of pushed me. And I think that they all saw something that I didn't really realize at the time. It did take a lot of luck at the same time, but it was just, how could I outwork everyone on the field? That was kind of my MO. I just know that I'm not the fastest, not the most technical, but you better believe I'm going to outwork you any day of the week.
There's something so humanizing when you hear a former pro say something like that, because the non-athlete in me likes to know that sometimes you don't have to be gifted right off the bat. Sometimes it's just about the work that you put in.
Yeah. I grew up playing soccer. And I did the select soccer, the Eastside FC year-round soccer thing here, and I was never the best. Maybe I was good enough to be playing year-round, but I was never the best player. And I remember my dad would take me out before school, and we'd go down to this little piece of grass by this church that was near us, and before school be doing dribbling drills. And
really?
And I was trying, but at the same time, it takes the dedication of being I'm going to do this to make myself the best. And that was something I did not do, which is why I probably did not play in college.
Then we wouldn't have this podcast, Kel.
Exactly. But one thing I think that really resonates with me, he said two things there. First, he said luck.
Yeah.
And part of me was like, yeah, but it takes a lot of work. And then he followed that right up with, I may not be the best, but I'm going to work harder than everyone.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that really resonates with me. I think that throughout life, I've tried to find things that maybe I was exceptionally good at and couldn't really find them, but decided, well, then I'm just going to really put my nose to the grindstone and I'm just going to work and I'm going to practice and I'll get better. So that really resonated with me.
I think it's that whole like, oh, mere mortals can also do this too. If you put if you put your nose to the grind, But also him talking about and crediting his parents. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we don't want to do the thing they know we can do, and it's that whole him wanting to come home, being tired of the weather, and calls it a grind. And imagine how competitive it was, because all of a sudden you're not just your high school standout. You're surrounded by all the other high school standouts. And they wouldn't let him come home. They said, try it for another year, stick it out.
Right.
But like you said, Kel, the harder you try, sometimes the more luck you can create, right? Isn't that the saying? Is that not the bumper sticker? Did I get it wrong?
I don't know if that's the bumper sticker, but yes. If it's not, create it, put it out now, Mary. But yes, it's about it is this combination of luck, but also the right circumstances and the fact that you put yourself in the position for luck to strike.
For sure.
So some kind of combination of the two.
And in Brad's case, the parents who were encouraging him with, what's that word? I should stop with these analogies. I should just stop. Bad medicine? Because when you put yourself in his shoes in college, think about it. No one wants your parents to be like, no, dude, you're sticking it out. You're not coming home. After you just unloaded how hard it was, how hard it is, you don't like it. It's not feeling good. And they're like, no, you gotta stay there for another year and then we can revisit this.
Sometimes you gotta get through that pain. Pain for the gain.
Oh,
maybe that's what it is.
You can take that one. I've seen that one for sure, I think. But that's a good segue, Kelly, because you talk about pain. And let's fast forward now from, the hard days at UCI, where he did blossom, by the way, air quotes, to 2017 when he suffered a herniated disc. And we talk about how athletes, their body is everything. That is their weapon. That is their livelihood. And in 2017, he herniated his disc. And that is when the next gargantuan pivot happens in his life.
At the time, it was 2017. I had herniated my disc, and I had gone to actually the Seahawks back specialist in Seattle, and he told me, like, you're not going to come back from this. And I was like, of course I am. My disc was completely herniated, and that's where the nerve root kind of comes through. I couldn't walk. I couldn't do anything. I got 2 epidurals, and it put me at the end of my 9th season with the Sounders. And I had a conversation at MLS Cup with Adrian, the owner. I was out of contract. And he said, we can't sign you unless you're fully healthy through preseason. And I was like, well, I just got told by a doctor I'm never playing again. I don't think I'm going to be ready by preseason. I was kind of shopping myself around the league because I got to do what I got to do to protect myself and extend my career. And luckily, I had a great relationship with the coach at Kansas City, who was the assistant coach for Ziggy on my under-20 national team back in 2005. It was Peter Vermees that selected me to go to the under-20 World Cup. So I owe a lot to Peter Vermees in Kansas City. He called me up and said, hey, I don't care if you're healthy. I'll give you 2 years. Just be great in the locker room. And I think we have a great team. So I went, I did my rehab, but I could never get to the point of where I could play. I kept like popping muscles here and there stemming from my back. And at that point, I knew that I was, done. I didn't want to do another year of rehab just to hang around in the locker room. And so it was at that point where I was toast. And I kind of knew that it was coming, but, in the back of your mind, you're like, there's always a chance. And unfortunately, there wasn't. And, you kind of just have to pivot at that point. What's really hard is, a lot of us don't have our degree. And so our main focus, even through college, was soccer. And so it was, how do I get to the next level? Okay, I'll take these classes, but my degree doesn't translate into anything post-career, right? Very few guys go and, they go to med school and play soccer, or they, are finance majors and then they become a financial advisor afterwards. So there are the chosen few that were able to do that. But for most of us, it's like, I go to college, I got to leave early because I know I have a draft or I'm really good. So I leave a couple years early, and then you play 10 or 12 years, and then you're having to go back and get your degree at 32, 33, and the brain has shifted focus. So what I was interested back then, I'm not really interested now. And it's kind of this jumbled brain of what am I doing for most of it. But I'll always look back on soccer fondly. And that has been really difficult for me after leaving the game injured. But, I'm kind of at the point now where I can look back and really reflect on what was accomplished.
I know that's a lot, Brad, but I really feel like what he's describing, they're all so intertwined. You can't, I didn't feel like you could just isolate his injury and how he looked at that. It jumps right into, well, now that I'm injured, what can I do? Literally, what can I do with my life? And that is a stress I couldn't even imagine.
No, and that's something that a lot of professional athletes find themselves in. It's like, okay, I had support and everyone was rooting me on because I was good and because I was benefiting them. Well, now, if I'm not benefiting them, it's all on me. Who's helping me? And I think the pressure of that could be pretty crushing. I thought what was interesting about that story is I don't know exactly how. I didn't know the arc of his career. I didn't know if you were going to say he went to Kansas City and gritted it out and came back to the field and Disney movie.
He outworked it?
Yeah.
Not this case.
What I think is so refreshing about him sharing that is that you can see the not fairy tale ending necessarily, because who knows what his fairy tale is later. Who knows, if it leads to something great down the line. But to hear that, yes, he acknowledged his limitations. The fact that someone from Kansas City was willing to bring him into the locker room, probably just based on his character.
Yeah.
And because he's a leader, that shows, the kind of person that he is, and probably shows that there's a lot into not just physically what can you do, but who are you and what can you bring to a team, which clearly he was valuable in that. And it sounds like hopefully later on in this story, as you lead me, he taps into that part.
There's definitely
a little
some
bit
of
more.
That. But even when we were doing the interview, Kelly and I was looking at him, and you listen to what he's telling you and you follow him. The highs are so high in this for athletes. The highs are incredibly high, right? And the lows are painfully low. So you go from being the team captain to being a star in Seattle to being loved and celebrated constantly, to all of a sudden being injured, having to leave the city and the team that you love, and then being forced to pivot once again to the point where he's looking at you, in this case me, and he says, a lot of us don't have our college degrees. You're back to the land of the mere mortals, talking about what did you study? What's your resume look like?
What have you been doing this whole time to advance your career? And you're like,
right.
I had a whole career in between.
Exactly.
FYI.
So he goes on to say, at the time, he's always had leadership qualities. That's how he describes it. He's always looking out for other people, looking out for himself, not so much. That's just his style. And at the time, when he's going through all of this, there's a bigger question that pops into his head. Not just, what do I do now? But the bigger question meaning, what am I now?
Something like 3 years ago just started creeping into my mind about this identity thing. And I was actually really struggling with just my mental state and what am I doing? What's the point of this thing? And I just felt lost. So started to see someone pretty regularly and have gotten to a good place about being pretty vulnerable and open in communication with, my friends even more. One of my good friends has kind of been down that road as well after retiring from concussion issues. And I called him one day and I was like, dude, I'm struggling. And he was like, oh, finally. Because I was the guy that just everyone reached out to that thought they had it all together. And when inside I was like, I don't have anything together. But I wanted to support my friends and not let them know that I was struggling. What you read about, though, is like the guys that are really, really struggling, right? And make some life decisions that if they had support and had help, probably wouldn't have made, hopefully wouldn't have made. That's the most unfortunate part. So I think that's the whole point behind our, players union hiring a full-time psychologist and making sure that people know that the resource is there, because you just don't want to get to that point where the only thing you read in the news is guys that have maybe taken their own life or gotten behind the wheel of a car and made a wrong decision. You almost want to read about guys struggling in the news versus just like, oh yeah, he's, started a business and he's doing great. Like, that doesn't do us any good, really. And so I know that there's a lot of guys out there and, women's players too that are, struggling. And to read that or hear that, I think just opens the door for more conversations, whether publicly or privately. Candidly, I got divorced in the last year. What I needed back then wasn't what I kind of needed moving forward. And that's the fault of my own change. And, what comes along with that is relationships with friends and family that change also, the perception too. So that's been another learning to deal with that has been, difficult also. And then your relationship changes with everyone. You're used to being in front of fans and playing in a game, and then all of a sudden that's taken away too. So, you see some fans around the area, but it's just, it's not the same. You're not a player anymore. You have to understand that. And the younger fan is coming up. And in the last 6 years, there's probably been, a couple thousand people now that weren't season ticket holders and now are, and they have no idea who I am. Right. And so when you walk around and you're at the stadium, like, they don't know who I am. Their kids don't know who I am.
Lots in that one too.
Yeah.
And that last bit of him talking about, I had entire stadiums cheering for me, and now maybe some of these kids that see me and not know who I am. But going back to kind of the beginning of what he said is, what am I doing? Well, when something really big happens in life, or a big change and everything feels like it's turned upside down and you're just like, nothing makes sense anymore. What am I doing? Everything's really disorienting. And for him to open up like that and be vulnerable about it and say, yeah, get some help, talk to someone regularly, and make that the normal thing. Make it normal to talk about the things that make you uncomfortable. So hoping that it resonates with someone else and helps them too.
And when your identity's wrapped up into one thing for so long, and all of a sudden that changes, that question of who am I? The one thing I didn't think about that he really, afterwards, when I was logging this interview, he made me think, okay, it wasn't just about you and yourself. You don't realize your relationships that you have with other people, they also saw you as that one thing. So when you're not that one thing anymore, there's like this ripple effect. Other relationships change. How people see you change. I don't necessarily like that, because that's something that we can all apply in our own lives, right? You don't have to be a pro athlete to relate to that. Maybe you're the person who loved to party and socialize all the time, and all of a sudden you get married and have twins. Well, your identity has suddenly changed. And the friends you used to go out with, that's not your world anymore.
But I like how he brought it to a very relatable point for so many people, especially if you just, he mentioned his marriage and his marriage ending.
Yeah.
Well, that comes with changes in friendships and how people perceive you. And, it changes all these things that you thought were in place are now not in place.
Yeah.
And trying to negotiate that all over again. I know that resonates with me.
I know it does, Kelly. Mm-hmm. It made me also think about our interview with Connie Thompson.
Yes.
Longtime colleague.
I wrote Connie on my page.
Great minds think alike. That is a real saying. And I did get that one right. She talked about retirement, right? After doing, being a consumer reporter, being a news reporter for decades, and then stepping away, retiring. And by the way, I just want to point out, we saw her a couple days ago at a retirement party. She's doing awesome.
She's so great.
Loving life.
What about the rousing applause when everyone announced Connie Thompson's here going to say a few words?
Yeah, I know, right? It's like she never left. But to be so married and enmeshed into one identity and having to step away from that, it's that ripple effect, not just you dealing with it, but how others see you and then trying to navigate those changes. It's just, we don't like to talk about that, but that's natural.
And it can happen at any point in life.
Yeah.
Whether it's a relationship or a job or just something big that changes in life. It's one that I feel like I don't want to always be bracing for, or that people would be wise to always brace for, but that's where kind of living in the moment comes to be helpful, because you never know what's coming around the bend.
At Overlake Medical Center and Clinics, we offer the full spectrum of care for every stage of life. And with our skilled and compassionate physicians and care teams, it's so much more than a place to get better. It's where you can achieve a lifetime of good health. Welcome to Overlake, where your care is our passion. For more information, visit overlakehospital.org.
Brad talked about, he made references to his natural leadership qualities. He's always looking out for someone else. He's a solution seeker, And so when he's going through all this, he thought he was taking steps toward getting out of this, finding a solution. Here's what he has to say about that.
I think the hardest part about the grind was being injured. I was injured, with soft tissue injuries quite a bit throughout my career. And the worst part is, all of your teammates, family get to go out and train, and you have to sit there and watch on the sideline or sit in a room and put ice on a muscle. And you feel worthless at that point. You feel like you've let players down. And most importantly, you feel like your body has let you down. So you always run in through your mind of like, okay, well, what did I eat 3 days ago? How did I sleep 4 days ago? What do I need to do to not get injured the next time? And it's this whole Rolodex of how do I not get on this table again? And because you just want to be outside and practice and be able to at least have an opportunity to play in a game. So I really leaned on friends and family, and that was kind of my outlet. But there's nothing really that they can do. I mean, a sports psychologist is going to say, keep doing what you did to get you here. You could talk to a nutritionist. Oh, let's add omega-3 into your diet. There's nothing that can get you out of that spiral, in my opinion, or at least I didn't have the resources. I wasn't talking to a therapist at the time while playing at all. So I can't say that it would have worked for me better. It was just like, all right, body, we got to get through this. And yeah, it sucks. It absolutely sucks. But then once you feel healthy, you feel like, you're on top of the world. And that's a hard thing to relay. Like, I went to Houston with the team, and it's the end of the year. It's hot, and the guys are, it's the end of the year. I remember that like sluggish feeling, the grind. And me and Kellen Rowe were there, and Kellen's recently retired too. We're both doing radio. And we're just like buzzing to be at the field. Like, we just want to like get our foot on a soccer ball and just remember what it's like to be back on a practice pitch and just be jovial. And you're joking around with the guys like, all right, boys, let's go. Come on, put the smiles on. Like, you are playing a game for money. Like, how cool is that? And they're just like, oh, and it's hard. It's hard. It's a hard grind. And those that do survive have figured out a way to work through it all while being injured and staying positive and trying to get the most out of, what they love and what they know how to do.
That part when he starts talking about, his family, friends, so lucky to have that. The omega-3s, he's got a nutritionist. It's just when you in retrospect, but these are the things, Kelly, it's only obvious when you look back in retrospect. At the time though, you feel like you're treading water. It's hard, but you think you're doing okay. Like, yeah, okay, I know what vitamins to take. I've got my support group. I'm doing the research to better myself. And it feels like you're pushing your way out of it. But when you look back, you realize just how you were treading water and going nowhere.
Yeah. And at the same time, in a desperate reach to kind of cling to things, to be like, if omega-3s you think are going to fix my whole situation, then bring it on. But I love kind of hearing the relationship with the game change, because there is something special about it. At some point, you fall in love with the game. Mm-hmm. At some point, it becomes a game that you're getting paid for to play. And then it goes away, and then maybe you're, a little sour on the idea of the way that it all went down. But then I love hearing him talking about just wanting to get his foot on the ball.
Oh, my gosh, right?
That just goes full circle back to that bumblebee soccer where it's just exciting to kick a ball around with your friends.
Oh, that fire never goes out.
Yeah.
That passion. And, I mean, this is going to sound goofy, but when I was talking to him, when he describes it, I mean, there are moments where I was completely transfixed. I don't play soccer, but I could see myself coming out of the tunnel. Oh. The way he describes it, right? The grass, the cheering fans. It was just him describing it. That's how passionate he is about the game still.
Maybe your passion could bring you to the Rain, the team.
Oh. I had to do a double take.
You could just, on pure passion, Mary.
Listen, passion is contagious, and Brad almost, at the age of 46, nose to the grind. Who knows? I can create these opportunities. But yeah, that level of passion, isn't that extraordinary? I just thought that was so cool.
And what I also like is that it sounds like he came back to a place where he can have that love of the game incorporated in his life in a different way.
Yeah.
Where it's not like a chapter he has to close and put behind him, but clearly there's something that he loves about it and a part that's such a part of who he is.
Okay, did you cheat and look at my notes?
No. Do you have...
What? How do you...
Okay, Mary, Mary, I could never read that handwriting if I tried.
I take that as a compliment. I should have been a doctor
or
pharmacist.
I wish you guys could see it.
Okay, so you mentioned that, how his passion could take him to the next spot in his journey, and that's exactly what it was. It was, even though he was no longer a professional athlete, an active athlete, the passion never died. That did not go away. And I think initially that's what makes it so hard, is because you still feel that fire, but you can't do anything with it. His medicine, him getting through the toughest part of making this pivot and embracing this next chapter, it was still fueled by that same fire, his love for soccer. And it was life-saving in many ways.
I play indoor soccer at Arena Sports now. And obviously there's guys who have played at a high college level. They've played some semi-pro. And there's guys who have games before us, games after, and ladies too that, never played professional soccer. But the one thing that I love about soccer is when I'm on the field, I don't think about anything else. I could have, the worst day at work, our team loses. I could have, relationship issues. I could have a family issue, a pet. But once I step on the field, I'm so hyper-focused and being in the moment that I don't think about anything else. And I need that. Like I didn't play soccer for a good 4 years after doing it. And then I stepped back on the pitch and I remembered now that feeling of, oh wow, I drove to the field really upset. And then during the game, I didn't think about what I was thinking about before. And I played 3 nights this week and it allows me the opportunity to just like zone out and check out. And that has really helped me just realize that the love is still there for soccer and the passion, and I can get my competitive hit. Now, nothing will replace the butterflies that you get walking out in Lumen Field, but those little hits of competitiveness and the mind just kind of going blank and figuring out the puzzle that's on the field, that has really, really helped me.
Isn't that crazy? I have to be honest. I was a little nervous about including that very first part. If you're listening in Washington State, Western Washington, you may be familiar with Arena Sports. I don't think it's a secret though. I think Brad was very opening.
Him.
I know.
Poor guy.
But the competitive hit, and when he talks about, and still nothing compares to the butterflies when you step out. I mean, even at that moment, I was feeling butterflies, and I don't play soccer, Kelly.
Right.
The passion.
I have these cleats that I've had sitting in my closet for some time.
Has your fire been ignited?
I think so.
You're going to go to Arena Sports.
Well, I go to Arena Sports regularly because I take my children for their indoor soccer.
Yes.
But what I can really relate to is relatively recently, I took my kids to go run on the Newport High School track or around the field or something, which is where I went to school and where I played soccer. And there was something about just being on the field where I was like, oh yeah, like this is my spot.
Oh,
like
I love
run
that.
up and down and then kicking the ball around with the kids just a little bit. There is something that's, it's not the butterflies of the big adrenaline rush of the game. And clearly, I never played at an advanced level, but there are butterflies when you're kicking a ball around with your kid.
Yeah.
And sharing in something, and you see little Cooper dribble the ball, and I tell you, it's something so beautiful, it could almost make you cry.
Oh,
But
yes.
do you have something like that kind of brings you down to a very basic core of something that like gives you joy?
I think all of my little passion projects that I've picked up over the years, they have been little hits like that. Totally. And they've been sustaining me because sometimes you need that because it forces you to step away from the day-to-day. Just see them every day, the relentless, the normal responsibilities, the monotony of it, doing something new, doing something active. And that's what I love about what he said. And, we talk to people all the time, Kelly, where they say, I need to go for a run, right? I got to go to the gym. I got to do something because it gives them that. It gives them that.
And there's something about just physically moving your body and doing physical exertion. I mean, there are chemicals in our body that all go give us that extra boost of energy, the endorphins or whatever they are.
But I think it's also worth talking about. While it's so awesome that Brad does this in 3 days a week and he found that passion once again, and it sustains him, I think, and he didn't mention this, but I just want to point out, I think that was a significant step on his part to have his background. If you're a lifelong soccer fan, you know who Brad Evans is. And he's willing to just not worry about what other people think, what they might say, if he gets swarmed, if he doesn't get swarmed, all of that stuff. He's got to wade through some bit of insecurity and apprehension to even walk into an Arena Sports facility, right? Put on his cleats and just play pickup soccer.
What a cool thing, though.
Right?
Yeah.
I just thought that was so cool that he did that and kind of courageous.
Courageous, but it sounds like it helped get him back to basics and get him back to what he loved about the game in the first place, which is not necessarily all the glory that comes along with it, which is great, but just it's a fun game.
Yeah.
Kick a ball around and try and put it in the back of a net. It's very straightforward and yet very fun.
Yeah, yeah. And he wasn't hanging on to his stardom. It was never about that. It was about his love for the game. And that's something you have in common, that he's got in common with other people that are not pro athletes.
Right.
But still, can you imagine playing against him? Sorry.
Take it easy on me. I will pass it to you and you can score, and then I can claim an assist.
That's right. As we started to wind down our conversation, it was really eye-opening for me to look at this group of people, meaning pro athletes, in a whole new light. Once you learn about, their own insecurities, their own vulnerabilities, a pretty short shelf life, and something that you've worked your whole life for, strove for, you broke your body down for, when that's taken away or when it's time to turn to the next chapter, how hard that can be. And he was talking about how, clearly, obviously, not just soccer players, it runs the gamut, every single, sport there is. We love to glorify the success, football, basketball, insert sport here, but we don't really pay attention to what happens when that's over. They just kind of disappear.
It doesn't matter if you've made $300 million in your career or $100,000. You still leave the game. And whether players want to actually talk about it and be open, I can guarantee you that they're struggling leaving the game, men's and women's. Doesn't matter. Like what we all say as athletes is like the real world. You're entering the real world at 32, 33 years old, not as a hyper-focused 20-year-old coming out of college with a little bit of a runway. You leave the game after 2 years, you make, $600 million. It doesn't matter. Your purpose and performance is what you live for. So credit to the guys and girls that can do it. But, the vast majority of us are all still just trying to figure out. Luckily, soccer players can kind of walk around and blend in, right? We're like 6 foot, 180 pounds, like pretty normal size. I can't imagine being a football player that's 6'6", or a basketball player trying to just function like here in Kirkland, walk around. You would get swamped. I can guarantee it as a Seahawks player, or, hockey players are a little bit like soccer players and they can blend in. But yeah, I just can't imagine the fandom that they attract. It's funny, like I always thought growing up, like superstars, like you saw the demise of like a Britney Spears and all the cameras when that was really popular and all the tabloids. And I think in the back of my mind, I was like, just move somewhere else, like move to an island and live by yourself. You have enough money to do it. Just buy an island and live there. But no one wants to live their life like that. We want to be mostly surrounded by community and have access to the things that we want to do. But imagining a lot of these players that are big athletes, like they can't do that. And that's, the expectations put on them from the city or whatever specific sport they play has turned them into like something bigger than who they are, which is just a normal human being.
Kind of heartbreaking, isn't it?
Yeah, the thing that comes to mind with this, I always think about this on the NFL draft. Mm-hmm. The NFL draft is a huge moment. You see these guys who have literally worked their entire life for the one moment that they can actually monetarily cash in on everything they've put their bodies through, all the things they've sacrificed to go to those practices and be dedicated to the game and all of that. Then it comes to the draft. They get really excited. They get paid for the first time. And I hate it when I always hear, say it's the first couple games of the season, some rookie got injured. And you think,
oh my gosh,
like they got to this point.
Yeah.
But the one thing, and I think you mentioned this right before we listened to the clip, but it kind of goes with the theme, is this whole all your life.
Yeah.
You've done this all your life, which is true. But God willing, your life is not over. And you get to live more on the other side and build what that other life looks like. And that will be a part of your life. But it won't always be your whole life.
Mm-hmm. And also, if you make it to 80, 90, ironically, your pro years, that's the shortest gap. That's the smallest window of the entirety of your life. Mm-hmm. And I know there are cynics out there that think, they make millions of dollars or they're doing just fine. You see them on every commercial. You talk about, the Michael Strahans, the Shaqs, the Jason Kelce's. I just need to point out that is a small group. A small group. The vast majority of pro athletes, elite athletes, don't find that level of success, popularity, monetary security. They have a very short window in which they can make that money and then
even if you do
retire.
Let's say you make millions of dollars as a NFL rookie, and everyone talks about how big your contract is. Well, you are also a kid.
That is so
just
true,
graduating college. What are you, 23, 24, somewhere in there? And you don't know how to cope with that amount of money in such a short time period. And that's why I think that finances are known to be a very big deal for these pro athletes. It's a lot of money when you're really young all at once. And how do you manage that? And I know that that's actually a really big focus, and they bring in financial advisors and people to help walk them through it because, yes, it's a finite amount of time that you have, and that's what you've worked for at that point is for that contract. And who knows, sadly, how long it's going to last.
Yeah. But when Brad talked about how he said, those other guys who are so obvious, gods of sports, the big guys, as he refers to, hockey players and soccer players, they look like normal humans. But, why don't you just go buy an island? And he answered his own question because nobody wants to live like that.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to be isolated, Everyone just wants to live amongst your community. And what did he say? Just be a normal human being. That part really just got to me.
Yeah.
The humanity. We all want the same thing.
The sport does not, no matter, even if you think it does not define who you are as a human being on the inside. So, because the game's over, it doesn't have to mean you're over. Very easy for me to say because I'm not a pro athlete who's been cheered on by thousands of people in a stadium. So I recognize that's easy for me to say, but it sounds like Brad's kind of recognizing that too.
Well, the wild swings of how you see yourself, your identity. And this is all obviously in retrospect. Brad is now a color commentator for the Sounders. He has his own podcast. He's also a soccer coach at a local private school.
Oh, my goodness.
And I know, can you imagine? He loves doing it. And he found this next chapter in his life, and he's completely embraced it. I want to thank him for being so vulnerable and going into the details and sharing the not-so-great parts, too. But like he said, it was all about, let's talk about that part. Let's talk about what happens when you can't do that anymore. And let's talk about the struggle, because if you don't talk about the struggle, then you only highlight the terrible, tragic mistakes that are made. That's the only thing that becomes the news, and no one talks about the other stuff. This is a conversation, Kelly, that could have easily lasted 3 hours. That's how open he was. Ask me anything. I'll share what I went through. And I think the biggest thing is he wants people to start talking about this. The athletes that we celebrate on TV, let's care about them when we don't see them on TV anymore. And let's recognize that it's a hard journey, but it's one that they can find success in afterwards. So I'd like to thank Brad Evans for his time and his honesty.
I will also say, he has left an amazing legacy with the Sounders. That is something that even if he wants to talk about, he's been out of it and has changed course or stuff, he can't undo the mark that he's left on the organization.
A permanent fixture, part of that team. Thanks, Brad. Thanks, Kelly.
Thank you, Mary. Hard Turn is a Sinclair podcast produced out of KOMO TV in Seattle, Washington. We're your hosts, Kelly Koopmans
and Mary Naum. Our show is produced and edited by Jordan Rizzieri and Brian Petrus, with engineering support from Adam Bronstein, Bill Fesh, and John Reynolds. Production support from Eric Newell.
For more information on the topics discussed in this episode and to stay up to date on future episodes, follow us on Instagram at Hard Turn Podcast and on X at Hard Turn Pod.
You can follow Hard Turn on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Do you know someone making a big change in their life? Share this week's episode. Your recommendation helps our show grow. So spread the word.
We're trying to do what you told us to do.
Man, damn, I thought that was such a good one.
Hard Turn was presented by Overlake Medical Center and Clinics.